Well, hello, friends. It's Emergency 24. Follow along, and I'm going to show you how to make some meals in a jar that you can utilize during an emergency or grid down situation. I have an innovative method of cooking, or baking rather, that I think you're really going to be interested in. I was invited to this Emergency 24 collaboration by Natasha over at the Budget Preppers and Tanya at Low Family Adventure. Don't mind me looking at my notes down here because I can't keep all these names in my head. So if you see me look down, that's why I need to refer to my notes. I want to tell you a little bit about how you can follow along in this collaboration of Emergency 24 meals and enter for chances to win some amazing prizes. Be sure to check the description and follow along with all of the other collaborators on this amazing Emergency 24 giveaway. Okay, friends, first up today, I'm going to show you how to make some emergency desserts in a jar. I call them desserts, but you also could use it as a breakfast bread, so to speak. And I'm going to show you how to create this without an oven. So if you don't have electricity, but you do have your secondary cooking source, such as a propane camp stove, you could do it on a gas range, which is what I'm going to use today. You could do it on a little portable butane burner, which you can use inside. Any kind of alternative cooking method that you can use a pot on should work for you for this amazing, delicious dessert in a jar. So to get started, I have a standard quart-size mason jar. I have a funnel just so I don't make a mess. Now, something I did not mention is that all of our meals are actually gluten-free because our household is 100% gluten-free due to celiac disease. So it's super important to us that we have gluten-free foods on our shelf at all times, no matter what kind of emergency might strike. So we're going to start today with, we have King Arthur 1-for-1 or measure for measure flour. This is the 1-to-1 substitute. This is a wheat-free blend. I do not use their wheat starch blends because I do not feel that wheat starch is ever a good idea for a person with celiac disease. Okay, but I'm going to start by putting our toppings, so to speak, our flavorings in the bottom of this jar. So I'm going to start with 1/2 cup of white chocolate chips. You can use any brand that you like. I'm not even sure what brand these are because they're no longer in their packaging in my house. And we are going to make this dessert raspberry white chocolate. And I already know this is a hit in my house because we made it and everybody gobbled it up and it was delicious. So I'm going to use my Thrive Life freeze-dried raspberries. Now, before these are open, they're shelf stable for 25 years. This is amazing, guys. 25 years on my shelf. Freeze-dried foods are amazing because they are picked at the peak of ripeness, immediately flash frozen, and then freeze-dried. So they retain multiple times the value of nutrition than what produce does at your grocery store, which has probably been picked 2 to 3 weeks ago and wasn't even fully ripe yet when it was picked. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so for this recipe, I'm going to use about 3/4 cup of this. And I did this based on my first go at this one and figuring out about how much fits in the jar because I want to keep my recipe where it fits in here. Now, you certainly could crush the berries a little bit to make some more room in here. The reason why I put them at the bottom is then the flowers and things, but it looks so pretty. The flowers and things will settle in around, which will allow more room. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my flour. This is 1 cup of a gluten-free flour blend. Now I'm using the King Arthur like I mentioned, but you don't have to. Now you have choices here. We can use a little sifter just to make sure. I wasn't too worried about that, except I might use it for like the butter powder when we get to that. So here's 1/2 cup and a full cup. And get those into my jar. And see what I mean? They start filtering down around your berries, okay? That just allows you to have lots of room there. Okay, and then we're going to use freeze-dried egg in this. And now you say, but Jamie, I can't handle eggs. What do I do instead? Guess what, friends? You can use psyllium husk or flax seeds instead. Either one, I would just do the same amount in and call it a good day. So I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of our freeze-dried egg powder. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with freeze-dried egg powder, but this really is my favorite. It's the Thrive Life freeze-dried scrambled egg mix. I don't know if you can see. You probably can't see. It actually has like little crystals. It is amazing. And it literally is eggs. That's all we got in here, guys. So I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons. And I like to move it around a little bit in the jar so it kind of looks pretty. Okay, and then next up, we are going to use, I've got kind of stuff all over the counter because I've been doing so many of these and I haven't taken the time to take them back to the cellar in between making things. So butter powder. I am going to use my little sieve, small one, for the butter powder because I did notice it clumps up a little more. Now, I should tell you, this one is Augustin Farms butter powder. It's not my absolute favorite one. It doesn't taste quite as good as the Thrive, but it's what I had on my shelf. So it's what we're using, okay? Use what you've got. So now this is a lot, and the butter is super important, so don't skimp on this. I tried to make it once without a fat, and it doesn't work. So 6 tablespoons of butter powder. And I'm just pushing all those through so I don't waste any of that delicious butter. Okay. Now, one thing that I don't have today because my Amazon order did not arrive is my vanilla powder because I am out of powdered vanilla, but I will link below the one that I like. And you just put in 1 teaspoon of vanilla powder, but also, you know, vanilla is shelf stable. I always have it on hand. I also have little tiny jars that I could pour it in if I wanted to gift this to somebody. I could gift them a little 2-ounce amber bottle of my homemade vanilla extract, just tied to the jar, and how pretty would that be? So I'm not worried about it, but if you want 100% shelf stable without having to find anything else, make sure you get some vanilla powder also, okay? So a teaspoon of vanilla powder would go in there. And then we are going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. This is my giant jar of baking soda. I buy everything in bulk around here. Old habits die hard. I have 7 children, and even though 5 are now adults and 3 of those adults no longer live at home, I still shop as if I'm feeding an army. Wait, is this my 1/2 teaspoon? Okay, took me a minute because I'm like, I want to make sure I've got the right one. Just to make sure we don't have any clumpies. And you know, really, when I whisk it all up, it's not a big deal for the clumps, but I did notice the first time I made it, there was a little bit of clumps from the baking soda and the butter powder, I think. And so just make it easier, and let's get rid of that. We're going to need a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and you know what I realized I did? I forgot to put my salt on the counter, so bear with me for a minute. Okay, I always use Redmond's Real Salt. This container has been around the ringer because I buy in giant bulk bags, and I just refill this little guy. And we are going to do only 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and I don't think that will fit. Isn't that beautiful salt? I just love it. I always struggle to figure out where the actual camera is on here, guys. Okay. Probably didn't need to do that at all. Okay. And now we're going to use brown sugar and white sugar. And I think, just to make it look pretty, we will do the brown sugar first. And brown sugar calls for 6 tablespoons. And if you remember your math from home ec class, 4 tablespoons is 1/4 cup. So I am going to do a 1/4 cup and then 2 tablespoons so that we have 6, because I don't really want to scoop 6 times if I don't have to. Okay. And I'm going to flatten this and make it look all nice and pretty in here. See how lovely it's looking? And the very last thing I'm going to add is 1/4 cup of white sugar. And I always use organic cane sugar, so it's not quite white, it's a little off-white. 1/4 cup. Okay. Now, that is all she wrote. Now, if you wanted to, there is a tiny bit of room left in my jar today because the way I layered it, I think I'm going to throw a few more raspberries on top just for a little extra goodness. Because you can never go wrong with extra berries. So I can easily put another 1/4 cup up there, so that gives me a full cup of berries. Now, I'm not going to increase the white chocolate chips because, like I said, I have made this already, and I do know how it turns out, and the white chocolate chips like melt into it. It's so good, but I'm afraid that that would add a little more gooiness to the final recipe, which we don't really want to do. Okay, so beautiful, done. I'm going to cap that bad boy. Isn't that lovely? Now this can live on your shelf. I could use a sealer, a jar sealer that sucks the air out, like that Avid sealer that's being given away during this collaboration of Emergency 24 meals. I also have one, an attachment to my food saver that would do it as well, and it sucks the air out. Then that's going to let this last on my shelf for, gosh, I don't even know how long. The dairy, the butter probably has the shortest shelf life. So, 5 years probably if I wanted to. Now, if I'm going to use it in the next 6 to 12 months, I'm probably not even going to worry about sucking the air out or putting any kind of anything in here. I'm just going to seal it up good and call it happy. I'll make a cute little label. I have some of these little labels. I'm not fancy. And a Sharpie, and just stick it on the top. Write that it's a white chocolate raspberry steamed pudding. You wondered what we were making, didn't you? Well, there's the official name. I have been super obsessed with Depression era cooking, war era cooking, learning a lot about rationing and how things were done, even in the UK during that period of time. Now, pudding in the UK is vastly different than pudding in America. You may or may not know that. But pudding there is much more like a cake or a bread. And steamed puddings have gone back for hundreds of years in their culture as a dessert, as a savory item, as a side dish. And so I did make one of these as a savory item as well. It's probably not good enough that I would enjoy it on a daily basis yet. I will figure out that recipe more, but definitely would be good enough for an emergency meal when I want something I can just cook without an oven and I want to have a bread-like product maybe to go with a soup or a chili, okay? I'm going to give you some alternatives for how to make this, or not how to make it, but like flavors, varieties, and I'll list all that down below as well so you can check it out. So a couple variations. Replace the raspberries with strawberries. Simple, flavor change. Now, if you like chocolate and berries together, you could go strawberries with milk chocolate chips or semi-sweet chocolate chips, and that would be delicious as well, okay? Another option is to make it with a brownie type of, just a brownie steamed pudding. It's delicious. I made that one and I think it was our family's favorite so far. I mean, we love this one, but the brownie one, oh my gosh. So for the brownie one, I did everything the same. Replaced chocolate chips for the white chocolate chips. Took out the berries, of course. Added a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder. And I think I increased the chocolate chips to a cup. I'll be sure I put that recipe below. And then I used a little more water to rehydrate it because I'd added that cocoa powder, which is more absorbent, okay? And I will also show you how I made all these. That was delicious. So far we have enjoyed the raspberry white chocolate and that brownie one, and they both have hit home, and you would not even know they're an emergency meal. Like, our family would eat them every day if I would make them. So I'm gonna stock several of these on my shelf so that we have a quick dessert when we want them ready on hand. We don't have to think about it. But also, if you're in a grid down situation, maybe your power's out. And it's been out for a while. I mean, my friends in Oregon this year, some of them had 10 days or more without power. Can you imagine? That's crummy. And it was just due to an ice storm, okay? Not totally uncommon. But sometimes in those situations, you're just going to want something that tastes good, that reminds you of normalcy, and that you're not having to go find a friend several miles away that might have power to do things. So having things like these on your shelf can really help you with just your emotional and mental well-being during that time, of any time of stress. Maybe it's grid down. Maybe it's a storm took out your power. Maybe it's a bigger emergency. Maybe it's an SHTF scenario, guys. I don't know what's coming. Do you? Let's be prepared. Okay, so next up, I'm going to show you how we whip this up and how we bake it. Stay tuned. Okay, friends, let's make our steamed pudding emergency 24 pudding in a jar, or dessert in a jar, because when things get tough, you still want something that reminds you of home. And this is kind of an innovative cooking method for emergency jar meals when you don't have electricity or access to a stove. Now, maybe you have an emergency stove or baking method. That's awesome. You can also mix this up and bake it in a traditional oven, but we really enjoy it steamed in a way that is kind of an authentic, historic British method. And I don't know that it was ever too common in the United States, except maybe in the very early colonial days, as we evolved into more of a custard pudding instead of a steamed or baked pudding. But let me show you how we're going to mix this up and how we're going to cook it in an emergency with just our gas cooktop. So I'm just going to open it up and I'm going to pour it into a bowl. You probably could mix it right into the jar, but that seems a little complicated to me. There isn't a lot of room and I don't want to make a mess. Oh, and of course the brown sugar is a little stiff in there, so a little stuck. Get it undone. Okay. The mix is in a bowl. All you need is 3/4 cup water. This is my reverse osmosis filtered water. And I'm just going to mix until it's all combined. I'm mixing kind of gently because I don't really want to crush all the raspberries up. I like them to stay in larger pieces. You can crush them if you want to. Whatever speaks to you, it's going to taste delicious regardless. An alternative is I had placed the raspberries and the chocolate chips on top of the jar. And then when I went to make it, I separated those first, mixed up the batter, and then gently stirred in. But I realized the jar, things just fit a little bit better if you put the berries and the white chocolate chips at the bottom of the jar and then let some of the flour ingredients, the powdered ingredients, filter down and fill in those spots. Here's our batter. It smells really good. So what I do to cook this, one, I had to choose my container. The first time, because I don't have a pudding mold, but I do have a springform. Lost the name of it. I have several springform pans in various sizes. This is a slightly smaller one. I think it's a 6-inch. I'm not 100% sure. I do have a larger, the standard like 8-inch size. I didn't use that one because I assumed it would be really flat. And this I feel like was about the perfect size. But then I thought, well, not everybody, sorry, I'm trying to put the string form together, so I keep looking down. Then I thought, well, not everybody has a a springform pan that will fit inside of a larger pot. So I had to think about what alternative could you use if you didn't. So when I made that brownie version I talked about, I just used a Pyrex dish. This is a 4-cup, I believe. It doesn't say on the bottom. Oh, it does. 4-cup. Just kind of a 4-cup. And that one came out like a souffle, like it rose above. It was so beautiful. I'll show you a picture of it. So delicious. So this works just fine as well. So if you don't have a smaller springform, use a glass Pyrex type dish, use a stainless steel bowl. Just keep in mind, don't use plastic. We don't cook in plastic. That's bad all around. We try not to use plastic in our house at all. Very rarely. Just don't cook in it, okay? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and use, you know what? Yeah, no, I'm going to use our springform pan. And I just put some parchment in the bottom of it. I have some rounds already. It's kind of cheating. And then I'm simply going to pour our batter. Let me turn this down, move this down so you can see. Okay, I'm going to simply pour our batter into that parchment round in here. Okay. Now, if you were using a regular bowl, you probably maybe could mix it up right in the bowl. I'm not sure how well that would work without making a mess. I'm all about keeping things simple, even if it means there's an extra dish to wash. And your bowl, you know, has got to fit into the outer pot we're going to cook in, which I will show you in just a minute here. Okay. Let me wash my hands again really quick before I show you the next step, since I stuck my finger in that. Okay, so here it is in our springform pan. Delicious. Now, I'm going to be using this 6-quart Dutch oven. This is the only enameled pan I still own. I will eventually replace it with a solid cast iron. All my skillets are cast iron, but I'm not going to throw out a perfectly good pan. So I have that pan, and I need something to hold my container off the bottom. So I realized first my steam basket was too big and it had a little stick in the middle, so it didn't work to hold the pan. But I remembered my Instant Pot had this really cool little rack. So that's what I used. Get creative. Look around your kitchen. See what you have. This is all about using things we have. But do this before you're in an emergency situation so that you know what you're doing when things get challenging. Now I'm going to fill the bottom with water, and I want it to kind of come up to the top of the rack. That was a little over. I filled my 2-cup all the way up. I'm going to add another 1/2 cup to a cup. Okay. Yeah, so about 3 cups of water there. Want to make sure that's covered. I don't want it to boil dry, okay? Now, I'm going to take my delicious pudding in the tin, and I'm going to set it right down in here. So this is where you need to check things as you're looking through your kitchen to see how you can make this. What pot do I have with a lid? You need some sort of lid, okay? What do I have to hold off the bottom of the pot? And then what container can I actually make my steamed pudding or steamed bread inside the pot? I made it without a lid on the actual inner container. I think traditionally steamed pudding tins or whatever they are do have a lid. It worked fine this way, guys. So I'm not going to go invest in something or waste money on something if I have things in my house that will work. That is part of being frugal. And I'm all about not just being prepared, but being frugal, okay? So now that this is all set up, I'm going to bring it to a boil. I'm going to turn the fan on, and I'm going to start my flame. Okay, so I'm going to start this over a high flame. When it starts looking like it's going to boil, then I'm going to turn it down a bit once it's boiling and keep it covered and simmering. So I'm going to go and put the lid on it. I'm going to set the timer for about 10 minutes to check and see if it's come to a boil. And we'll be back in 10 minutes to check on it. Okay, let's see if this is boiling. Yep, the water is boiling nice. I'm going to go ahead and top the water up a tiny bit. It's really important that we don't allow it to boil out. So I'm going to go ahead and top it up carefully so as to not pour any into the pudding. Just around it. Oops, I'm causing my flame to go up a bit. Okay, so I added another cup and a half or so. We're going to let it continue to boil. I'm going to turn it down to about a medium until I hear it boil again. I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes. Now, my experience the last time I made this was that I did 2 rounds of 15 minutes after it came to a boil, checking the water in between to make sure it didn't boil out. Then I turned the flame completely off. Oh, sorry, I should specify. I turned the flame down to low, left it for that 15 minutes twice. Then at the end of that, I turned the flame off. I left it closed for another 20 minutes and just let it sit to make sure that that pudding cake steamed all the way through. So I'll be back in 15 minutes. We'll take a look again, and then we'll do the next cycle of 15 minutes after we verify there's enough water to keep going. Okay, let's check on our water level again and see how this steamed pudding is looking. Looks pretty good. I'm guessing we have enough water, but it's always better to be on the safe side. So I'm going to just go ahead and top it up a little bit more. You just never want to let it boil dry. Okay. I'm going to turn the flame back up for just a couple minutes so that that water I added can heat back up in there. And then I'll turn it back down to low and we'll keep cooking for another 15 minutes. Okay, friends, there was our timer. Let's take a look here. Can you see that? It's beautiful and it smells so good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the flame completely off and I'm going to let it rest. And I don't know, I thought I let it rest 20 minutes, but it actually looks really good. So I'm going to give it about 10 minutes and then I will just take it out of this pan and we'll see what it looks like. So the reason why we let it rest in the pan with the lid on, but the flame is off, is just so it can continue to steam and get that ambient heat in here to make sure that it cooked all the way through, okay? Because we want a nice, delicious, baked type of dessert. So it's called a steamed pudding, but it's like it's much more bread-like or cake-like. It's denser, but it's so delicious. And this is a wonderful way to cook a dessert that you would normally bake in the oven in an emergency situation when you don't have power, okay? So the alternative would be that I would make my jar mix the same. I would pour it into a prepared 8x8 pan and I would bake it for about 25 to 30 minutes, probably at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I would end up with more of a blondie type of bar, which is delicious. However, this gives us a little bit more of a cake-like. It's really hard to describe if you haven't tried it, but you need to try it. It is so good. So we'll be back in a few minutes to check on it and remove it from the pan. Okay, our timer's up. Let's have a look. Now, this is why I really like the Instant Pot rack when I make it, because it has the little handles that stick up that I can lift this out of my pot with, which is a lot safer way to remove it, and I'm not fiddling with everything. Do you see how amazing that looks? I'm going to go ahead and move it over here onto my wood board. Okay. If you don't have yourself some wood cutting boards, I highly recommend you get some. I literally use them for everything. They act as a hot pad on my counters or table. They work great as charcuterie boards. I use them to cut bread. I use them as a base below our cooling racks. I use them for things like this. Super useful and not plastic. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pop the outer ring off of this so you can see what it looks like. Came off super easy. It's not even very dirty. I mean, there's a little bit in there. And hopefully I can peel this parchment paper back like a muffin liner kind of, so you can see. I did let it cool a bit last time. I let it sit for maybe 10 or so minutes out here before I peeled it. But it looks like it's coming away pretty well. I have sticky fingers, time to wash again. I probably should be careful lifting that up with my hands. I want you to have a close-up. Do you see how beautiful that looks? I don't want to slide it off of here. And again, smell-o-vision, you guys. I wish you could smell this. So good. I'm going to go ahead and slide it off of this cooling rack now. Not the cooling rack, the cooking, whatever you want to call this thing. The bottom of my Instant Pot. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece and show you how amazing this is. You guys, this is phenomenal. And one thing I did find out last time we had this is that after it cooled down, it tasted even better, if that's possible. Like, it's good like this, for real. But after it sits for like a couple hours and completely cools, it's even better. It's like the flavor intensifies, and I don't even know, but take a look. So good. You see the raspberries in there. You see some of the chocolate, but the white chocolate does kind of condense at the bottom and gives it kind of a gooey bottom. So delicious. This is not great for people that need to be low carb like me, because it's so good I'll want to eat it all. I probably should see if there's a way to make it low carb, but I avoid like sugar replacers, so I would much rather just have a couple bites of something during my eating window and just know that I'm just going to limit myself. I'm not going to go crazy. So good. You just have to make this. Now, as I was deciding which one to make today, Julia said to me, the brownie one is my favorite. And that one did go over really well in our house. So if you're debating which one to start with, the raspberry or the brownie, oh, so good. I don't know, adult taste, the raspberry white chocolate is probably my favorite. The kids really loved the chocolate. And I'll put a picture up so you guys can see what that looked like. It really looked like a giant chocolate muffin or a souffle or something. It kind of reminded me of a giant Costco chocolate muffin, but it's gluten-free and it's delicious, and it's an emergency meal that you can just keep on your shelf and pop out and make it even when your electricity is out, as long as you have your cooktop heating source, guys. Make sure you have emergency cooking. Get a butane burner. They're like 30-40 bucks on Amazon. I have one that's a Coleman brand. You can use that indoors. Always properly vent. Be smart. Read your directions. Follow the rules. Get a propane camp stove. Make sure you use those ones outdoors. They're not intended for indoor use, okay? Make sure you have some alternative ways to cook your food during emergencies, SHTF situations, grid down, whatever comes your way. Be prepared. All right, friends. Well, that's it for me today. I'm going to have one more bite of this absolutely delicious. So good. Like, my gosh, I can't even tell you how good this is. All right, friends. Thanks for coming along today. Blessings upon your day, and stay prepared.